two. That's right, day two of the Housing California Unconference, where you and I are working together to create homes, health, and wealth for all Californians. Now, let me thank the executive director, Lisa Hershey, and David Zisser for inviting you all to join us today. And let me give a special thanks to the conference team and Deanna Roberts for putting together such a wonderful event. Now, if you weren't here yesterday and you're unfamiliar with who I am, my name is Clean and I'm a hip hop artist from Oakland, California. And today I'm going to perform a piece for you called Black Dreams. So sit back, relax, maybe enjoy the snack, and have fun with this part of the program.
Black dreams to buy your mama a house. Black dreams just to get up off the couch. Black dreams, graduate, get a job. We just trying to beat the odds. Black dreams, we just want to make it out. Black dreams just to see 21. Black dreams, be a father to your son. Black dreams, don't be out here on the run. You ain't gotta tote the gun. Black dreams, we just want to have fun. Black dreams, we just want equal rights. Black dreams, get some freedom in this life. Black dreams, we just trying to get ahead, treated like Americans. Black dreams, we just want to make bread. Black dreams, don't get caught up on the block. Black dreams, you ain't gotta sell rocks. Black dreams, don't get locked up in the cage, put it to an early grave. Black dreams, don't get murdered by a cop. Don't get murdered by a cop. Black dreams from black kings and black queens. And when it's reality, we'll never lack things. I'm talking building us up, creating black green. So when they say we acting black, we know what that means. That's black stocks, black shops, black crops, black owned, black homes, black blocks, black care, black shares, black chairs. Embracing all of your black, start with your black hair, your black hips, your black lips, your black kiss. That black love from black skin, that's black rich. Your black health, your black wealth, that's black bliss. When you don't ever lose that pride in your black fist.
We want a bank-in movement in Memphis. Go by the Savings and Loan Association. I'm not asking you something that we don't do ourselves in SCLC. Judge Hooks and others will tell you that we have an account here in the Savings and Loan Association from the Southern Christian.
Black dreams to win many awards. Black dreams take my people on tour. Black dreams that I can meet a man with strength to withstand all the pain that my people will endure and open doors up. I can be the one to do what's not done. Though these times are heavy, my spirit can lift tons. Black dreams turn reality. I know it's real when my brother's not a casualty. Salary chasing, so calories racing, dealing with this pain in many ways. Tell me, how do we face it? Black dreams, don't die young, keep living. You got a purpose to burden, though it is heavy. I'm telling you that it's worth it. Black dreams that'll make my people proud of me. I do it for the ones I love and those who doubted me. Black scenes of black beings with black means, living in their purpose now. That's what I call a black dream.
We are telling you to follow what we are doing. Put your
Thank
money
you all
back.
again for rocking with me. My name is Clean. I had a wonderful time. I hope you guys did too. I hope you learned something. I hope you walk away with something. And I just want to give a special thanks again to Lisa Hershey, David Zisser, Deanna Roberts, and Gavin for bringing me out today. I enjoyed myself. Until next time, y'all enjoy the rest of the program. Peace.
Welcome back, and thank you so very much for joining us for the closing keynote session at this year's Housing California Conference. A virtual round of applause for Clean, both for the message and the musical talent that you brought to this event. Hello, I'm Carol Ornelas, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Visionary Home Builders of California. I am also a proud member of the Board of Directors of Housing California. I am so honored today to be able to welcome you to the closing keynote session with Mayor Michael Tubbs. I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with Michael from the day he became a councilman to the day he was a mayor, became a husband, a father, and then most of all, what is deep at my heart, to work on housing issues with Michael. He was a true champion and leader in our community. One of the greatest things that when as mayor, serving as mayor, that he brought to our community, when people laughed and said, this is a crazy idea, he introduced and brought to our community the guaranteed basic income. I'm going to share just a little trivia to you that we're also very proud at Visionary Home Builders. Michael's mother was a single mother who had the dream of home ownership. One day he walked in and his mother said, "I bought a home. I bought a Visionary Home Builders home." I was so proud to be able to say this all during the time that he was a mayor, because great things come out of affordable housing. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Ben Schoten, Managing Director for the Community Development Finance at Union Bank, one of our longtime title sponsor. And sorry if I messed up your name, Elizabeth, but I'll do better next time.
That's quite all right. Thank you. Well, as was said, my name is Elizabeth Van Schoten, and on behalf of Union Bank's Community Development Finance Group, we are pleased to continue our support as a leading sponsor of Housing California. Union Bank recognizes that alongside financing affordable housing, there is a need to support education, advocacy, and collaboration for a better and more equitable housing future in California. I was thrilled when Lisa Hershey notified me that former Mayor Michael Tubbs would be a speaker today, and that I would have the privilege of introducing him. Many of you may already be familiar with the fact that he was elected as mayor of Stockton, California at the young age of 26, making him one of the youngest mayors of any major city in American history. I believe he was also Stockton's first African-American mayor. Tubbs has served as mayor from 2017 and just ended his career, his mayoralship in 2021 in January. As mayor, Tubbs was lauded for his leadership and innovation. Under his stewardship, Stockton was named an All-American City in 2017 and 2018, saw a 40% drop in homicides in 2018 and 2019, and led the state of California in the decline of officer-involved shootings in 2019. Notably, Tubbs is a champion of partnerships and excites philanthropic supporters to help address the needs of Stockton. Tubbs raised over $20 million to create the Stockton Scholars, a universal scholarship and mentorship program for Stockton students. People may also be familiar with what was just mentioned with Mayor Tubbs as he began to advance the concept of guaranteed income. Long before Andrew Yang was in the spotlight for promoting UBI, I recall seeing Mayor Tubbs speak on panels and feeling inspired by someone who so clearly wanted to improve the conditions of struggling Americans. Today, he is the founder and chair of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. I encourage folks to check out the website and to see which city mayors have signed on. Tubbs received a BA and MA from Stanford University. He has been named a fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics and the MIT Media Lab, among other distinctions. Tubbs currently serves as a special advisor to California Governor Newsom for economic mobility. Thank you, Mayor Tubbs, for getting involved in local politics at a young age and for continuing to dedicate your career to social change. Welcome.
People are so nice to you once you're a former or once you lose. No, but in all seriousness, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the kind introduction. And Carol, so great to see you. I miss you, my dear friend. And I have to start my speech with saying, I was going to start with the story of my mom, but Carol buried the lead. So I'll start with a conversation I had with Carol when I was a councilman. We were doing this collective impact strategy to increase outcomes in the south part of the city. And we're talking about education, we were talking about crime, we were talking about health. And we mentioned housing, but if you know Carol, you know if housing's not first and top of mind, it's not good enough. So she called me into her office and she said, Michael, I need you to understand is that every conversation you have, and I just saw my friend doing ASL. I am so sorry. I speak really quickly, but I'll try to do my best to slow down so you could do your thing. And Carol said that housing is fundamental, that in Stockton, so many issues that we have are because of housing insecurity and how it intersects, how it interacts, and how it makes it hard for kids to learn, how it makes it hard for families to be together, and how any strategy to improve the city of Stockton has to be one that has housing first and top of mind. And I think that sort of paradigm and that worldview is incredibly tantamount today, because the name of this conference says we're trying to house California. And we know that housing in California is incredibly difficult for a variety of reasons. We know that California has one of the largest populations of unhoused individuals in this country. We know that the state of California has some of the highest numbers of folks who are housing poor and housing insecure in this country. We know that California has some of the most expensive homes and rents in this country. And we know in California, just like anywhere else in this country, if you make minimum wage, there's no way you can pay for an even 1-bedroom apartment in any county in the state. And I will also say this pandemic has also given us an opportunity to think about sort of how do we build a housing system much in the same way that we built a house, in terms of thinking of the foundations. All these things I mentioned aren't acts of God. They aren't acts of happenstance. They're deliberate policy actions. If you look at the foundation of housing in this country, we know that the foundation is actually exclusionary in many respects. We know that for many years, some folks were denied access to housing, access to loans, or once they received a loan, were given loans that were, just a decade ago, were given loans that were predatory. Were given loans that with the intention that they would default and be further in debt. We also know about things like redlining. We also know about things like inclusionary zoning. We also know about things like restrictive covenants. We understand that the foundations of our housing system and the way it intersects from the planning commission and land use things to the bank loans and the credit score process are all infected with the same disease that affects every institution in this country: racism, white supremacy, and this hierarchy of human value. And we also know that in this moment, and that's why I'm so excited to be in conversation with all of you passionate advocates, that we have a chance to lay a new foundation, a foundation built on equity, a foundation built on the understanding that housing is a human right. That like, I remember during the pandemic being mayor, saying it's hard to tell people to shelter in place when they don't have shelter. It's hard to tell people to shelter in place when they're worried about if they're gonna be able to pay the rent. It's hard to tell people to shelter in place when they're sheltering with 2 and 3 families. And may I submit to you, as not a scientist, but part of the issues we had with COVID in this state in particular is because of the housing issues. But we saw that manifest in the way the virus spread, in the way that those who lived in multi-generational or multi-family housing were more likely to be infected than those who didn't. We saw it manifest in the learning outcomes of children who were living in housing insecure environments, who were sharing limited bandwidth and broadband with 4 or 5 cousins and neighbors and living rooms. We've seen what happens when we build on a shoddy foundation. We build on a foundation that doesn't think what's as good as for me is as good as what's for you. And my grandmother always used to tell me this parable about there were 2 builders. There was a wise builder and a foolish builder. And what we've seen, particularly in this pandemic, is illustrated so clearly that as a society, we've been like the foolish builder. And the foolish builder was someone who built an amazing house, maybe a mansion, maybe in a mansion with an ADU and a big backyard, but built it on a shoddy foundation. Built it on a foundation that was not meant to last. And then when the storms came or a pandemic came, that house shuttered. It was no longer, it was insufficient because of the foundations. In the same way, she told me there was a wise builder who built their house on a rock, on something solid, on fundamental truths and values, so that when the storm came or the pandemic came, that house still stood. And may I submit to you today, 2020 illustrated to us that the foundations upon which we were building, not just housing, but our society, was foolish building. It was built on a shoddy foundation that hasn't worked, won't work, and doesn't work for all people. But the moment before us is a special one, where we are given this amazing opportunity to rebuild again and to build on a foundation of solid values, namely that housing is a human right, that all people deserve dignity, and that there's no hierarchy of human value, that I am because you are, that I love my neighbor as myself. And I would say, particularly in this pandemic, the Newsom administration has been doing, with more work to do, has been doing amazing work. If you look at Project Home Key, taking this money and buying hotel rooms, not just for temporary housing, but convert to permanent supportive housing for folks who need it. It's a huge first step, and it's a national model. And all of us in California should be proud of that. By June or July 30th, the governor has committed to doing something on evictions. That's something we should all be proud of. The announcement yesterday or 2 days ago in the New York Times about rent forgiveness so that our small landowners and those who were falling behind on rent, not because they didn't want to pay, but because they didn't have enough money to pay, it is huge and big. And I think that deserves to be celebrated. The things we're seeing in cities like Berkeley and Sacramento, banning single family zoning and banning exclusionary zoning, are big accomplishments and big things to build upon. But we know we all have to do more. And I would say, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but in case there's a couple folks who aren't yet converted, it's not enough just to build. It's not enough just to be a developer. It's not enough just to house hundreds, thousands of folks. Like, what we need are troublemakers. We need rabble-rousers. We need people who have the lived experience, the experience of seeing how housing lets people sit up a little bit, share how housing leads to healthier communities. And we need folks to advocate for policy. This is fundamentally an issue of values and policy. This is a fundamental issue, again, of policy and values. So if our values are one, that housing is a right, that according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people need security and shelter. If we believe that all people deserve dignity, and if we believe that and maybe it's part of the reason why I may be former mayor in some respects, but irregardless to me, whether you work, whether you're healthy, whether you're sick, you need housing, and folks should be provided at least some baseline level of housing. If we believe that, our policy has to reflect that. We have to make it so that affordable housing is not a bad word. Like, think how bizarre that is. We are in a state where almost 66% of the population makes less than $75,000 a year. Yet it's hard to get at affordable housing through planning commissions. Like, the majority of the state qualifies for some form of affordable housing, yet affordable housing is a boogeyman. That's incredibly bizarre. And it goes back to values. It goes back to who deserves what. And it goes back to us having to have this conversation of housing being tied to humanity. That the fact that we have so much wealth in this state, so much success in this state, so much so that even during the pandemic, we had a $100 billion surplus. Yet we have so many people who are unsheltered, so many people who are rent poor, so many people who can't find affordable housing in their communities, so many people who have to commute 2-3 hours for work because the housing that they can afford is 2 hours away from where their job is completely unacceptable, and we are all culpable. And I think that's the work that we are called to do today. So as I conclude, before we do the Q&A with my good friend Chris, 10 years ago, I was on the Freedom Ride with some of the original Freedom Riders. And one guy, Bob Singleton, he looked at me and he said, "Michael, I was arrested on August 4th, 1961. Why is that day important?" And I said, "Well, sir, you were arrested. And if you weren't arrested, I wouldn't have the opportunities and privileges I enjoy today." And then he looked at me and smiled and he said, "No, son, on that day, Barack Obama was born." Then he said he had no idea that the choice he made on August 4th, 1961 to do something, to not just talk about a problem, but figure out a solution, would pave the way so a child born with no opportunity would have the chance to be president. And then he looked at me like I'm looking at you, and he said, "What are you prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, the world looks a little bit different?" And that's really the conversation we're having. We're having a conversation because we can't go back and change the past. The present is a result of the past that wasn't changed, but we can influence the future by what we do today. And I say this as someone who has benefited from the security that comes with housing. I remember as a young child being housing insecure. I remember as a young child spending a month in a Motel 6 with vouchers as my mom waited to figure out where, as a teenage mother, where we would go. I remember living in substandard housing, housing that human beings, in my opinion, shouldn't live in, housing that wasn't safe, housing that we didn't feel proud going into, housing that was the best we can do. And I also remember the pride, as Carol mentioned, when she bought her first house, a visionary home, and we would drive by and watch every day as the house was constructed. She would say things like, we're gonna be the first people to use this bathroom. And I saw the dignity that came with ownership, that came with shelter, that came with a place of security and refuge. And I'm crazy enough to want that same feeling, that same opportunity, whether folks are renting or buying, for every single human being in the state of California. But to do that, it's going to take some hard choices, some hard conversations, and a willingness for all of us not to rest on our laurels, but to do even more. So again, friends, what are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, the conversation at this conference is radically different? The conversation is about sort of, wow, look at what they did 50 years ago and how that's created a community, a state where everyone has a right to shelter, where everyone can find housing, where everyone can find housing that they can afford, or affordable housing, where everyone's given the dignity and the security that comes with what's foundational. Like 50 years from now, they look back and say, like, wow, I'm so glad they built on a solid foundation based on rock solid values that really reflect our all common and shared humanity. And I know it's a daunting challenge, it's a big challenge, but I'm excited to be in this fight and to do this work with you all. So looking forward to what we build together, provided we get our foundation right over the next several years, so that 50 years from now, a child born housing insecure is in stable housing, and their children are in stable housing, and their children's children as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Haney. I'm the Executive Director of the California Budget and Policy Center, and delighted to be with you all here today to talk to my friend, Michael Tubbs, who just inspired us all with his opening remarks. I know I could hear you riff like that for just the next couple of hours, and we could skip the Q&A. So thanks for the inspiration. It's a delight to be with you all here today. And to have a chance to talk with Michael a bit about some of the issues he raised. And so I wanted to start by asking you a question. As you know, the theme of this conference is homes, health, and wealth. And obviously the work you did in Stockton, the work you're doing now connects to all three of those themes. What you just said connects to those themes. But maybe we should back up for just a second and let you tell the story of what you did in Stockton with the Guaranteed Income Project, what it was, and why you did it and what you learned.
Yeah, well, first, Chris, good to see you. And let me apologize. I might be on the plane on Friday during our board meeting. So I love you though. But to answer your question, I absolutely hate poverty. I am disgusted by it. I think it's primitive. I think it's antiquated. I think it's barbaric. I think it's uncivilized. I think it shouldn't exist. And I think it's not an individual failing, but a collective failing. And because of that, when I became mayor, I said, I thought I would have 8 years, but I tell my team all the time, whether it's 4 years or 8 years, we about to do something about poverty. Because I think that's just the root of all the issues and the way it intersects with housing and how so many people aren't able to build wealth because they don't have, they spend so much of their income on shelter. So my team did research, came back with this idea of a guaranteed income. I remember reading about it in college and when studying Dr. King and being really fascinated by the fact that despite doing dozens of Dr. King reenactments and things as a church boy, no one ever talked about guaranteed income as part of his dreams. So that really intrigued me. And I was like, and I remember saying this, it will be really interesting one day to be part of the conversation about whether this idea is a good idea or not. Like, can this dream ever become a reality? So fast forward 10 years as mayor, my staff came back with this idea of a guaranteed income. And I said, okay, well, how will we pay for it, et cetera? The next week, I was at a conference with our good friend, Natalie Foster from the Economic Security Project. And she told me serendipitously that they were looking for a city to try guaranteed income in. and wanting to seize the opportunity and feeling stars aligned, I embellished a little bit and I said, I have a task force set up looking at guaranteed income. It's something we're very interested in. We'd love to partner with you on this. And that's sort of how we started the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration. And again, this was in 2017. So this was before Andrew Yang's candidacy for president. This is before stimulus checks. This is before even the governor's earned income tax credit expansion, which happened in 2018. This was before the guaranteed income we now have for families through the child tax credit passed by the Biden-Harris administration. It was like a radically different policy landscape. But I'm so glad we did. And I think for me, that has been a lesson I go back to in terms of courage, in terms of what's necessary, and to think not, well, maybe you should think more politically if you're in politics, like if you're in office holder. But I think for me, it really taught me not to think in terms of politics, but think in terms of people and think about what's needed. And eventually people will catch up if it's right. So when we started, it was one mayor. Now we're at 55 mayors from across this country who are part of Mayors for Guaranteed Income. Now we have the LA County doing 1,000 people for $1,000 a month with government dollars. LA City putting $40 million in, and the state of California proposing, the governor Newsom under his leadership proposing $35 million to support the dozens of pilots going on in the state. So very proud of that work.
Yeah, so why don't you say a little bit more just about, like, you know, what was it that the program did in Stockton? You know, how much money per month? And then I know you all paralleled it with a research project to then evaluate how it went. And the results of that were eye-opening for a lot of us as well. Not surprising, because we knew if we gave people who needed money, that would matter. But would you share a little bit of what the findings from the research were as well?
Yeah, so essentially we gave $500 a month on debit cards, and the criterion was broad. So 75% of the city could qualify based off living in a census tract at or below the city's median. And we randomly selected folks, a control group, a treatment group, looks just like the city, look just like each other. One group got $500 for 24 months, one group didn't. And what we found in the research is inspiring, but also very heartbreaking. We found that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to work full-time than those who didn't, and to move from part-time work to full-time work. We found that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to be, less likely to be unemployed than those who did not receive the guaranteed income. We also saw health impacts. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income went from stressed to normal levels of anxiety, and from depressed to not depressed after just 1 year, similar literally to clinical trials of Prozac. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income were more able to do the things we formed government to do: be parents, be partners, and be good, productive citizens. And we also saw that the $500 was enough to help with income volatility. This idea that incomes fluctuate or expenses fluctuate from month to month, that allowed people to really build economic resilience, which was really key going into a pandemic. And anecdotally, we heard so many stories of how the $500, people would save it up to put on a down payment for like an apartment, because they could pay the monthly, they could afford the monthly. It was the issue of affording the monthly and the 2 months down before. Like that was the issue. But they're like, okay, if I have just $500, I can save this up for 4 months. That's enough. And that was just always inspiring to hear, because like, no, they were like, we could afford this rent. What we can afford in this instance is sort of the security deposits or these other things that are beyond kind of the monthly check I have to write.
Yeah, thank you for that. For those of who haven't read the results of the work, I would highly recommend it. I'm sure we can find a link and make sure that that's shared with you all. So you're now in a role with the governor as a special advisor for economic opportunity in a state that's a very expensive place to live in, particularly for low and middle income households, as you were saying in your opening remarks. People who are trying to cover basic living expenses for housing, healthcare, childcare, food, and the like. So what kinds of policies are first on your mind in these early months of your work? What kinds of conversations are you having with the governor about the work you're doing in the near term and what that might look like in the years ahead?
The governor has an amazing team. I'm happy to be one of several folks who are just doing incredible work. In terms of the things I've been really focused on, namely this American Rescue Plan, and ensuring that we were taking this opportunity to make one-time things that pay dividends. So the $2 billion in funding for childhood savings accounts, that's something I spent a lot of time on. Spoke to the governor, advocated, and him and his team were like, let's do $2 billion. So I'm really proud of that. Jason Elliott's been just a rock star on the housing stuff. So just playing a support role to him. Like, let's do all these good things. There's some money in there for like summer youth job and regional economic planning. Kate Gordon and her leadership have worked with her on this just transition piece and how do you make sure inland California is as prosperous as coastal California, and how do we make sure, particularly for communities where they have to transition from fossil fuels, that we're giving them the tools to transition in a way that creates more opportunity. And then moving forward, post this ARP, my work will be very focused on ending poverty in California and bringing together thinkers, doers, folks, really focus, come up with what's a policy agenda, but what's also a narrative strategy to just not have poverty in California, which I know for some people seems like, oh my gosh, that's such a tall task. But for me, I feel the same way about the fact that we have poverty. Like, to me, that's the radical thing. The very existence of poverty in a place that has so much innovation, so much talent, and so much wealth, it's radical and jarring for me. Oh yeah, and then the basic income stuff in the state budget as well.
Yeah, well, and that's a transition to the state budget. We're at the end of a process, or we're nearing the end of a process where the state will arrive at a budget for the next fiscal year. And I'm always struck, even though there's a lot more money on the table this year than I think any of us had envisioned there might be, because of the American Rescue Plan, because of how overall economic conditions have done. I'm always struck that there's this, it always feels a little bit like there's a disconnect between the incremental decision making we have to make in a budget process and the bigger picture need, like with the roadmap home and the work that's been the theme of this conference around systems change, narrative change, some of the things you've talked about. So, how do you think about how we connect those things, right? The next 10 years or the next 50 years, to go to your anecdote from your opening remarks?
Yeah, I probably have more questions than answers. So I'm not even sure mechanically how. I just know it must be done, right? And I think that sort of urgency around it has to happen, the necessity of it creates the how, and by trying and doing. But I know, particularly with, I think the ARP process though was a good example, because in from the governor to his cabinet secretary to all the cabinet people, there was just a real sort of intentionality about how do we do this to pay off the things we know are immediate needs, but also make investments in the future in a way that's fiscally responsible. So we're not creating ongoing costs with one-time funding, which is easier said than done. So I think it's that. And now part of our challenge is, how do we go explain to the people of California what we're doing and how this ties into this California dream, and how this is something we should all be excited about. So to answer your question again, I think it's just, we have to do it. We have to take care of immediate things. We have to take care of the things right in front of us, but we'll never get to where we can be, or we'll never get to where we should be if we don't have a long kind of horizon. And I think that's why I enjoy my role with the governor now, and that I have the flexibility to really focus on 5, 10, 15, 20 years, moonshots, radical ideas, really push us to a North Star. And there's so many great other civil servants who are doing the hard work of the day-to-day that make kind of the ability to think further if even possible.
Yeah. Well, you've also been instrumental through your own leading by example in Stockton, and through the work you've done there and since then in the guaranteed income project spreading around the state and across the country. And you mentioned the mayors for guaranteed income effort, 55 cities around the country. There's a lot of those here in terms of cities and local governments in California. Can you say a little bit more about the types of projects that you're seeing emerge in those places? I know there's some variation there, and what you see as the hopeful end game in that strategy, right? Because these are often pilot projects.
Yeah, I am piloted out, child. I am so piloted out. And I thought after the findings, after a COVID-19 pandemic, that would be at the policy. But let me stop. We do have the child tax credit, which is literally $500 a month to every family making $150K or less, which is 90% of families with children. That's a guaranteed income. That's a huge win. So let me just pause and say there's been significant progress. So absolutely. But I think with all the pilots, we're just, my not so secret plan is to create the environment where there's no excuse, or the excuse isn't that we don't have data or we don't know, or that no one's done it, like as it was 4 years ago when I started. But then we can have a real conversation about, like, if we see the health benefits, if we see the economic impacts, if we see the employment benefits, why don't we have this? And really have that conversation, because I think right now in the policy space, it's a we don't know, and also some ideological things. So I want to get rid of the we don't know, and so we could just focus on ideology and really, because at the end of the day, it's a political question. Because all the data from Alaska Permanent Fund to giving money to Native American communities to pilots across this world, across the globe, all say pretty much the same things. Like, it's not bad, it doesn't hurt, it actually helps, etc. So the issue is an ideological one, and this one we have to contend with. But part of the strategy is also having other speakers, because not just Michael Tubbs. It's Mayor Garcetti, it's Mayor Schaaf, it's Mayor Garcia, it's Mayor Brown, it's Mayor Carter, it's Mayor Lumumba, it's Mayor Rhodes Conway, it's Mayor Jones. It's like the Avengers of mayors who are all saying we need a guaranteed income. And I know when mayors are focused and when mayors are excited about something, they really get the attention of kind of their constituents, but also the federal government can really push. So that's the end goal, to have all these pilots, all these good results, all this goodwill, to really beg the question, okay, so why aren't we doing this, and have that debate.
Yeah, great. And I appreciate you raising up a couple of times now the federal expansion of the child tax credit. I mean, we don't call it a guaranteed income program, but it's our national guaranteed income program, or the closest thing we have. And that expansion is huge, right?
It's such a big deal. It's like literally, in my opinion, the most significant policy, that maybe that and the Affordable Care Act of this century. Like, these are like significant, particularly if we make it permanent, these are significant investments in the American people.
Yeah. One of the folks who's watching and listening noted in the Q&A, and for those of you who are interested in asking questions, you can do that in the Q&A part of the app there. Asked if the residents in Stockton saw the value in the project, and if that's something that carries forward in terms of what the other communities in the state that are introducing these projects can learn from them.
Repeat the last part again.
The question was kind of two-part, like, did the residents in Stockton see the value of the project, and do they still see that value, to the extent that you can know? And is there something in that can be learned for the other communities that are now in this space?
Yeah, well, I think part of it's politics, right? So the people who love me love the program. The people who don't like me don't like the program. The people who don't have an opinion, if they got the money, they loved it. If they didn't get the money, they're mad they didn't get the money, right? So I think the biggest sort of takeaway from the Stockton pilot for me, though, was that even in the backlash, it was that there's so much need. It was that we're getting all this attention for 125 people. There are 310,000 people struggling in this city. And I tried to make the case that, well, look, we'll never get to 310,000 people if we don't start with the 125. The 125 is a start to get towards a policy. So I think most people in Stockton it's particularly because Stockton is such a working class community, such a community where people are literally working themselves to death and to bad health outcomes. I don't think anyone complained when they got their stimulus check. I don't think anyone was upset or protesting when this child tax credit came around. So I think there's a receptiveness, and I know for a lot of people there's a lot of pride, and that for the first time, at least in the last several decades, the first association with Stockton isn't necessarily something that's bad. It's not Stockton crime or Stockton bankrupt. It's Stockton innovation, Stockton basic income, Stockton, 54 other cities are following, right? And I think for a lot of people, even if they agree or disagree with the policy, it's still a place of civic pride. Like we could be a place where solutions are derived and not just where problems are studied.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the stimulus checks were another form of basic income pilot done at a massive scale, right? And the governor and the state legislators who passed the Golden State stimulus packages now with another round of that likely coming
I
in
forgot
the budget.
about the Golden State stimulus. OMG, terrible about my job. The Golden State stimulus, billion, like checks for everyone, huge.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. You've been a mayor, and I'm sure as part of the work you did as mayor, you've been involved in affordable housing project development and all that is involved in that at the local level. And now you're working.
Basically, this worked for Carol for 8 years, honestly. And Fred Shield, Carol and Fred Shield, and in the housing authority. I just worked for affordable housing developers for 8 years.
Right. Well, part of what these deals is that they're complex and they're multi-actor, multi-stakeholder. And the question I have for you is it seems like the state and local relationship is so pivotal to that going well, and just your own assessment of where we are today in the state in that regard, reflecting on your time as mayor, your short time you've had working in the governor's office.
Well, I can speak from my experience that the state was a big partner and sort of the affordable housing we're going to do. Stockton, when I was mayor, I think was the first or second city to partner with the state to look at turning sort of surplus state land into affordable housing. I know Carol's still working on that project, and it's a tough project, difficult to do, but one that we're happy to have the state's partnership on and figure out how do we make this work? Because we need housing, we need housing that people can afford. I think throughout the state, particularly if you look at sort of the uptake of Project Home Key, but also some of the other projects being done with, again, using surplus land to build affordable housing on, that there's a strong relationship. And not even because I'm part of this administration, but even when I wasn't, I would always say under Governor Newsom, the state has been a good partner to locals. Doesn't mean we agree all the time, but good partners to locals in terms of how do we solve this problem of housing? How do we create more housing in California? So absolutely was grateful for those partnerships and excited on this from this vantage point to see similar partnerships being done with other mayors.
So you've got a lot of irons in the fire. I follow you on Twitter, which is fun to do. I recommend everyone do that. And one of the things you'll notice is that Michael's doing a lot of stuff, including has a new book coming out sometime soon. So this is your chance to plug your book. Tell us what it's about. When's it coming out? And if you can give us any kind of a snapshot of what it includes, that'd be great.
Oh, so kind. So November 16th. The book will be out. It's called The Deeper the Roots. You can pre-order now on Amazon or from your favorite independent bookstore, et cetera. It's being published by Flatirons Press, but it's on an Oprah book imprint. So every year, Oprah picks 4 or 5 books that are like books on her imprint that she thinks tell stories that need to be shared. So really excited and proud of that. I actually wrote it myself. It took a lot of time. It was very difficult. I actually started, it was supposed to be done in 2018, but I was like busy being mayor, being married, having kids, just life was busy. So then I finished it actually in October of 2020. And it was only going to cover everything until being mayor. But then November 2020 happened. And my publisher said, well, now we want to hear some stuff about what was it like being mayor? What was it like governing during COVID? What is it like to lose? Like, what was that day like? How are you feeling? So the book is just about all the experiences that kind of shaped and kind of put me on trajectory to be mayor, share some of my governing philosophy, tell stories of community partners I've worked with on solving critical challenges. I think for me, the policy is personal. So it's really sort of a personal memoir that I think points out policy failures. Like all these things were like policy failures. It's a story of my 3 amazing moms, my mom, my aunt, and grandmother, and just how incredible they are. It's a story of Stockton, like this place as a character and as a site. talks about disinformation, talks about racism, talks about haters, talks about winning, talks about losing, talks about fears, it talks about everything. It's as candid. Yeah, nothing in there's a lie. It's all very true, probably a little bit too true. And I'm proud of it.
Great. That's it sounds great. Congratulations. I know you've had what 2 kids in there, gotten married, been a mayor.
No, baby number 2 is coming in August.
Oh, okay. I remember the announcement of the second one. So you've been a busy guy. All I'm saying is you've been a busy guy. I'm jealous that you completed a book in that time, and we'll look forward to reading it and hearing more about it. So are there other things in terms of what comes next for you? I know that the special advisor role is a special role with the governor, and you've got the book, and you're probably still figuring out what post-November 2020 means for you. But are there other things, aspirations you have?
Yeah, I am. I'm executive producing a couple things, a documentary and maybe a TV series. So that's exciting. I may be doing a podcast pretty soon. That's exciting. Yeah, and I think in terms of political aspirations, I'm fairly confident for the next 4 to 5 years. I'm not running for anything or interested in running for anything. I'm gonna do other things and help my elected friends, help advance a conversation. But I spent my entire 20s in government. Like from the time I was 21 to the time I was 30, I was in city council meetings every Tuesday. Like I deserve a break. So I think after 5 or 6 years, I'll look up and see if there's an office or things I'm interested in. But if not, I will continue to be someone who's laser focused on issues of opportunity, of equity, of economic security, and really just building a country and a state that works for everyone. And one of the things I'm excited about in my role with the governor is really, again, post child number 2 being born, a real laser focus on my end on ending poverty in California. And how do we do it? Where are the levers? Where are the tools? And how do you make this the North Star for the state? Like we all are team in poverty in California, because as California goes, so goes the nation. And I think if we do that, then other states will be like, oh, wait, we don't want to be left behind. And we'll see some more action at the federal level.
And in your conversations with people in different sectors, with public sector folks, private sector, philanthropy, nonprofit community, when you talk about something like ending poverty, you feel like the next 10 years and making, having that have traction and feel like there are paths forward that are focused on equity, making the state a more equitable place? Do you feel like that has traction and people get it when you say it? Or is there help you need from the rest of us that, to build the momentum around the narrative and the systems change?
Yeah. No, I think we all just have to make it personal, right? Like, do you want to be on team end poverty, or you want to be on team keep poverty? Like, who wants to keep poverty? right? Like, so I think that's part of it. Just make like, look, we are committed to ending poverty. We are committed to ensuring that everyone in California has real opportunity, that we don't care what you do or who you are, you should not have to live not like a human being. And because poverty is like really barbaric. If you look at the science about what it does to life expectancies, what it does to children's brain development, what it does for adults' capacity to future plan and make it changes your DNA. Like, think about that. Poverty, a man-made construct, changes your brain and your physiology and your health and your brain structure. Like the cortisol levels in your brain. It is, I see I'm passionate about this. It's completely ridiculous and bizarre to me. And I think that, but it has to be not one man's crusade, one person's crusade, one organization's crusade, but it has to be a collective crusade. Like, listen, let's at least have the conversation. Let's all just agree we want to end end poverty in California. Because if we start there and build consensus there, then we could disagree and debate on solutions. That's fine, but let's all get organized around this problem. And this is a problem worth solving for the great state.
I want to turn to a couple of what I think are the kind of typical questions that come from skeptics around the guaranteed income. So a couple of things that come to mind. A lot of you mentioned Dr. King, and I remember sitting in a room with you. I was lucky to be in a room with you and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a couple of years ago, and listening to the two of you talk about how you both came to guaranteed income conversations through the lens of Dr. King. And at the time, my own perception of that was that your universal basic income conversations were coming from Silicon Valley, right? And there was this sort of like, oh, this is the thing where the tech folks broke the economy and now they want to do something about it and give cash back. That's not where you were coming from about it. So that's one kind of thing that I hear from skeptics. And the second is a concern about the lack of work requirements, right? The value of work, the future of work, and how it connects to those. So, if you have thoughts about that, it'd be helpful to hear those. I know I've heard some of them, but it's also something I'm sure that evolves as you think about it over time.
Yeah, well, I think that, so there's a difference between a universal basic income and a guaranteed income. And I am personally supportive of both, but my main focus, and to sound like a broken record, is to end poverty. And a guaranteed income accomplishes that. And there's much more political energy in terms of actual political office holders around that idea. So that's what we're championing, because we're not going to go from zero to universal tomorrow anyway, right? Like the quickest way to get to universal is to start with guaranteed, which we see again with the child tax credit. But yeah, I remember people were like, well, this is the Silicon Valley thing, but like, well, yeah, Silicon Valley exists, like, and yes, and for me, it's like, if I'm in a conversation with somebody, I don't care where they start, but if we're going to journey together, we're going to have to agree on some fundamental things. I think from folks like Jack Dorsey and others who have been supportive, Sam Altman and others, it's, if you listen to how they talk about guaranteed income, it's probably different than they were talking about it 4 years ago. I think it's the result of this journey we've been on together about sort of what is a guaranteed income and what can it do in me. And again, I think another big fear people have is this idea of it replacing the social safety net. But for me, it's really an understanding that the social safety net also leaves out a lot of people. So this is more of an extension of the social safety net, A. And B, I think it makes the social safety net stronger, right? Because so your housing voucher doesn't have to cover everything. It can actually cover housing. Your food stamps don't have to cover everything. It can actually cover food. But I think it also is a different approach to kind of service delivery. And it's one that's more assets and deficit based. It's one that says, you're not the problem. So we don't need to tell you all these other things. But you're actually, the problem is that you don't have enough money, which has nothing to do with you and your worth and your ability. In terms of the second question, what was the second question again? You're on mute, brother. You were on mute.
Oh, sorry. It was a question around the future of work and concerns people have.
Oh, work. Yeah. No. Yeah. I really struggle with this argument about the dignity of work for several reasons. Number one, how do we define work? There's a lot of people who do work that's not considered work, particularly women who stay at home and do caregiving, domestic labor, et cetera, right? Or artists who are thinking and creating before they create something, or students, et cetera. But B, I don't think there's anything dignified in working 2 jobs and not be able to pay your rent. I don't think there's anything dignified in working yourself to death and not be able to unionize. I don't think there's anything dignified about working but not knowing what your schedule is for the week because your hours are just changed. Like, it's so arbitrary. I don't think it's I see you add in the chat. I don't think it's dignified to work and not be given a living wage. So I think the paradigm is the issue, that we attach worth and dignity to production when it actually should be attached to humanity, right? Like I believe in the dignity of humanity, or universal. So basic income for me is literally about universal basic human dignity. Like universal human dignity is really the concept. And if we treated people with dignity before they disattach from work, when they get to work, they'll work in dignified vocations that treat them with dignity, that treat them with the ability to provide for themselves and their family, with sick leave, with paid time off. And then lastly, I'll say, not in the future of work, but with pandemics, people can't work. So then what? They shouldn't eat? Like, you can't go to work because your work's been shut down, your small business has been shut down. What do we expect people to do? So for me, a guaranteed income also represents smart pandemic preparedness, because we live in a time of pandemics. As we speak now with COVID-19, there's a Delta variant that's out there that's twice as lethal, twice as contagious. 40% of people aren't vaccinated in this state, particularly people of color. And what's going to happen if that virus spreads again and people can't go to work because they're sick, but they don't have sick time off because there's dignity of work, but the work doesn't give them the dignity of sick days? It's completely ridiculous. So I think attaching dignity to humanity is the paradigm, and guaranteed income facilitates that.
And as your own project showed, the people who receive the guaranteed income were more likely to work anyway. So the premise of the question, I find, is often just starts from a place like, until we're handing people enough money that they could live and cover all basic expenses, which none of these projects are able to do. It's a moot set of concerns, right? But
it's so ridiculous. I know a lot of people, and I know people from all walks of life. I haven't met anyone who doesn't want to do anything. You know how crazy people were going at home? They're like, yo, Tubbs, you got to open this up. I got to go to work. This idea that people don't want to work is such a false misnomer. What people don't want is to be exploited, or people don't want to go to terrible jobs, or people don't want to go to places where they're unappreciated, or people don't want to go to work where it's unsafe. But no one wants to sit home and just be like Garfield and eat lasagna all day. That person literally does not exist.
Well, we do have a question from the audience about how we can move housing justice forward as part of the movement and poverty. And I'm going to use that as the closing question to also say, this is your opportunity for a call to action to ask Housing California and its thousands of friends and allies, what would you ask of all of us or all of them as you answer that question around housing justice and ending poverty?
Well, the best part about not being mayor anymore is that I have suspended I don't have to have all the answers, because I don't. So I'm going to turn the question back on you all. You all have lived this, have breathed this, have been working on this. Call the play. Tell me what we should be doing on the policy level, and I'm happy to organize and push for it. But I don't have all the answers to sort of the housing issues in California. I do understand the problem that folks can't afford housing. It's difficult to build. There's a supply issue. There's zoning issues, regulatory issues, et cetera. But I'm gonna push it back on the experts. And so I guess the call to action is to tell me what needs to be done, and I'll do my best to push and prod and add it to this ending poverty in California agenda, because I know it's necessary. But I would hate for my one brain to come up with the solution when there's thousands of you who individually know more than me and collectively know infinitely more.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Michael, for your time today, for the conversation. The tagline to one of my favorite podcasts is "None of us are as smart as all of us," which I think is where you closed us out with your call to action. I am deeply appreciative for your leadership. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today, and good luck. And we'll look forward to working with you.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you all for having me. And again, the work's not easy. So thank you all for the work you do. And please take some time to make sure you're well, because we're coming out of a pandemic. The problems have just been calcified and been illuminated, which require more of all of us to do more. So make sure you drink your water, you mind your business, you rest, and you do what's necessary to keep doing the amazing work you all are doing.
Well, I'm just going to step right in here. I'm Lisa Hershey, and I serve as the Executive Director for Housing California. And Michael, I just want to say thank you to you and Chris for this compelling conversation to help us imagine a more just and equitable society, to see a pathway towards creating more stability and true economic mobility with and for people and communities struggling the most, and call us to action via the Roadmap Home 2030 to create our California with homes, health, and wealth for all in thriving, sustainable communities. And I will accept that call to action that you turn around back to us and say, we accept that call. We wish to sit with you and stand with you and collectively imagine this new reality, the housing justice movement, the ending poverty movement, and collectively doing that together. So we will be circling back soon to take you up on that offer. Before I move into our final closing ceremony, I just want to offer a few quick notes. one, just personal, a huge wow from me that the team has been watching me do my happy dance throughout the past 2 days, opening strongly and powerfully, spending time with Heather McGee and Dr. T, and closing now with Michael Tubbs and Chris Haney. So rich, so powerful. Hopefully you all have had a shared experience. I do want to note tonight, right after our closing, we will have our Housers at Home networking reception where you can meet other unconference participants and truly dive deeper into a number of topics. This is your opportunity to do what we usually do so beautifully in person, but really spend time learning together, listening to each other, supporting us for collective action moving forward. Tomorrow, we will make sure that you catch or take a deep dive with us into 10 learning labs that start at 10 a.m. Please also make sure to do your end of conference survey. It's in Whova. This continues to allow us to improve our conference experience for all of you. Your input moves mountains. We make book changes based on your responses. Lastly, before I go into our final event, I just want to one more time take this moment to thank our amazing board of directors who you got to see all of in the past 2 days, our incredible staff, our unbelievable sponsors, partners, conveners, speakers, this year's event management partner, Deanna Roberts with DR Roberts Event Management, who's our new partner and hopefully our partner for life. And most or equally as important, you, for taking this journey with us, for challenging us all to think, act, and do business differently as we, 1, make the case, 2, build the base, and 3, repair, reform, and transform California as a place with homes, health, and wealth for everyone. We hope that you've found inspiration, made new connections, and gathered knowledge to continue this critical work we all do in California. We look forward to seeing you at next year's Housing California Conference, which we think and hope and pray will be in person, so we can continue to advance our collective action. And finally, we open this conference with my dear friend, mentor, and partner, Elizabeth Elliott, who currently is the executive director for the Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, and who is the face for Tribal Housing Now. And now, to help bring us full circle, we are honored to have Brisa Kiratu Fez, who is the face of Tribal Housing Future, to close out the unconference experience. So please stay with us, honor Brisa as she leads us through this closing ceremony. Thank you.
Si mamá, que eshe Brisa Huertero Yepes. Hello, my name is Brisa Huertero Yepes. I am a member and honored to be a dancer for the Hopland Vanapomo Indians. I would like to thank Lisa Hershey for asking me to speak today. It's truly an honor. And I'd like to start with a poem by Seamus Haney, The Cure of Troy. Human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and healing rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that the further shore is attainable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. Call miracle self-healing, the utter self-revealing double take of healing. If there's fire on the mountain or lightning and storm and Creator speaks from the sky, that means that someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its term. I'd like to honor the land we're on, whether you're on Pomo land like myself, Maidu, Miwok, Kauai, Paula, any indigenous people's lands in California. I'd like to acknowledge our ancestors' efforts in keeping it sacred and alive for us. When Lisa initially presented the theme to me, I heard the words homes, health, and wealth, and I thought about what those words meant to me, And then I realized that, you know, definitions of words are both dangerous and funny, because, you know, what one person might believe a definition is, somebody else might not. You know, when most people hear the word home, they're probably thinking of the house they grew up in or wherever they live now. And I've been fortunate enough to grow up, you know, immersed with many of my family's traditions and cultural practices, and to still live in the same home that my parents raised my siblings and I. And when I hear the word home, I think of, you know, auntie's backyard barbecues. I think of, you know, grandpa's 1976 Chevy Silverado, camping trips with my cousins, summer lake days. I think about the places that I learned to be a member of my family. And that's what I think of when I think of home. You know, my father taught me that a home is the first classroom. And that's where we learn to be a member of society and function and communicate. And I was fortunate enough to have two loving and supportive parents who worked hard to give my siblings and I the housing stability that I know not every child or person is fortunate enough to experience throughout their lives. And I figured out at a very young age that Western society is backward. And what I mean by that is that in Western culture, one talks about wealth as materialistic possessions, whereas wealth in my culture is not necessarily what you possess, but it's rather what you can give to others. I never understood how people could reverse the two. That's always confused me. I've never understood it. As a dancer, it's my job to ensure that my community is constantly healing. And in my culture, my family taught me that, you know, your health is beyond what your reports show in your blood work or your labs. Health is striving for your well-briety and checking up on your brothers and sisters. It's making sure that your family's happy and healing and working on being their best self. You know, when you hold on to negativity or what we call poison, you know, and you put that poison out into the world, it can really affect your family. You can poison your whole family. And health to me is my medicine. And if I don't take care of it, I can really hurt my community. It's bigger than one person alone. It's about feeling connected and at home in your own community. And we need to realize that we're constantly in need of healing, mending multi-generational trauma, loving our Mother Earth, and borrowing this land from our children. And I'd like to encourage and challenge all of you to think about your children and even grandchildren when making decisions in your own and neighboring communities, because we need to be considering that we're creating permanent solutions for the younger generations to come. And we need to think about the future, and we need to think about providing stable and meaningful housing for our family. Thank you.